It's Wednesday, April the 9th, 2025. Take a look at this. Look at this tornado. And hey, do you recognize that guy? Kit is back, joining us live on the Carolina Weather Group, telling us about all the tornadoes they covered across the South this week. What a crazy week of weather it has been. Let's get started with the live edition of the Carolina Weather Group. I'm James Brierton in Charlotte, North Carolina. Welcome to a live edition of the Carolina Weather Group, streaming on Facebook and on YouTube. I've got Frank Strait on our panel from Columbia, South Carolina, and back our former regular up through, we decided like 2017, 2018. Kit Thomas, now a meteorologist at ABC 24 in Memphis, Tennessee. Welcome back to the Carolina Weather Group, Kit.
I'm glad to be back. Thanks so much.
We are happy to have you back. We were just showing in the tease a clip of one of the many severe weather events you guys have had out there over the course of the last couple of weeks. You and so many Mets across multiple states working very, very hard. We're, of course, going to talk about some of the severe weather that rolled through the Carolinas earlier this week, including a considerable thunderstorm that brought 1.75-inch hail to Greenville, North Carolina. But I think our top story this week is definitely the ongoing severe weather aftermath in multiple states. Unfortunately, we know of at least 24 or so deaths across multiple states from the multiple days of severe weather. Tier 5 out of 5 from the Storm Prediction Center Severe Weather Outlook. So, you know, Kit, I'm gonna be honest with you. From where I sit in the Carolinas, even as a news producer, I feel like I know that there was bad weather, and I know certain facts like deaths and flooding and tornadoes. But can you fill in all the blanks for me as somebody who went through this locally?
So this was a day 7 slight risk from the Storm Prediction Center. It was, I believe it was this one, the largest day 7 slight ever issued by the Storm Prediction Center. So over the week ahead of this event, which was, of course, last Wednesday, they continued to update and hone in and really put Memphis right in the bullseye. And shout out to them. They did an impeccable job with this event, forecasting, like I said, 7 days out. This came after Sunday. We had some severe weather. I don't recall if it was a level 3 or level 2, but we did have a tornado touchdown in Poinsett County, Arkansas. It was rated EF0, so it was not the main event that we were expecting for the week, but it was sort of our first one. We were like, okay, this one looks good. Wednesday looks bad, but we'll get to it when we get to it.
Yeah, one at
This
a
is going to
time.
be the big day. And then once we got to Tuesday, we had a moderate, and I did the thing you're never supposed to do and check the SPC update at 2 a.m. from bed. And I believe it was Broyles issued the high risk for Wednesday.
Well, I'm surprised you made it to bed at all, because I feel like every time I looked at the live stream, there you were in front of the key wall, and I think you kind of said it yourself. You were like, which day was which just now? They must all be blurring together.
So Wednesday I came in at noon. I usually come in around 2. So I came in 2 hours early. We started up a live stream to carry a press release or presser from the Memphis Police Department. We started that around 2:30, and our first warning was issued. I was just looking at it. It was issued shortly after we started that live stream. We were like, all right, well, if we've got the live stream up, let's just
Just keep
let's
going.
start things up. And
Yeah.
I've got it here. It was 2:46, the first warning of Wednesday. After that, they issued a PDS tornado watch, particularly dangerous situation, for massive hail, for tornadoes that will be long tracked, very strong, and I think it was 70 or 80 mile per hour winds. I don't have it in front of me. There was too much going on.
Well, no,
And
certainly. I can help a little bit because you sent me a bunch of stuff before we started, and I can pop some of this up on the screen. But like, these are some of the preliminary surveys: Arkansas, Mississippi, Tennessee. From your greater Memphis area, April 2nd and April 3rd. But like you just mentioned, I'm looking at EF3s with 160, 165 mile per hour winds. There's at least 4 of them on this one graphic. And then you've got a page 2 that even has more EF1s, EF2s of winds over 100 miles an hour. So, I mean, how is the community reeling from all of this?
So there are several communities that were directly hit. If you go back one, the Selmer tornado, that one was a dramatic. We're looking here at sort of the first one that
Okay.
we had the first tornado emergency. This happened around 6:15, 6:45 time frame, and as that crossed over Interstate 555, we got a view of it, which James is trying to pull
Here it
up here.
comes. Yeah.
Here it comes. All right, so if you look in the upper left, right behind that earlier, they take it down here in just a moment, but you can see a very thin, dark band, and that's a clear rope tornado. Props to our producers who are pulling this
Right.
so quickly to get this, but you can see just a quick cone, a few flashes illuminate it from behind, and then it sort of fades into the rain shaft. It's of course a south looking north view here, so we can't quite pick it out. But then as it jumps
Look at
forward,
that.
we get it illuminated by a bright flash. And that was it was shocking for us because last we saw it, it was this thin rope, and now it's this large cone with that dust coming up around the bottom. um, Again, props to our producers and our editors for grabbing that so quickly.
It's not
uh,
easy to do.
no. And we we realized here this is going to be the show of the day. um,
Yeah.
Technically it was, because everything else that happened that became sort of outranking that came after midnight.
Yeah. But
Oh.
what's so incredible because as weather nerds, we're looking at the debris
Mhm.
detector here, as you called it, right?
Right.
We're looking at that radar signature and we're like, whoa, look at those colors. But nothing on a radar is ever going to be as impressive as just seeing is believing.
Hmm. And there's a lot of research about that, of if you can show the tornado, people take action faster. And so we were really glad that we had this resource from Arkansas DOT. Of course, this is actually velocity. I mentioned it, but the way I had to do it in the graphic system, I had to manually flip it back and forth.
Sure.
Um, but the debris ball quickly showed up near Bay, Arkansas, right past I-555. Eventually, it went past Lake City, Arkansas there, and we got a viewer who sent in this video. And here in the clip here, I'm actually like analyzing, like, this is the tornado. We did this at 10 o'clock. This was about 4 hours later. um, but you can just see the massive wall cloud, the tornado itself. There were some horizontal vortices, the cyclonic vortices on the side of that, which of course only happens in large violent tornadoes. It was astounding to look at. In the comments of this video, I have gotten some negative reviews of calling it beautiful and terrible. There's nothing.
Impressive. Yeah.
Right, right. And
Right.
and I don't say that to glorify it or say that it is a good thing. It's just this is such pure meteorology come to
Hmm.
fruition that's where I find that incredible nature of it. Of course, you can see power flashes with that. So far, this has been rated EF3, 160 I believe 160. If I swap back over, I can confirm that. So
You'll know better than me
it's
on which one it is on your chart.
yeah, so this was the EF3 150, um, Lake City. Now Bay
Okay.
Village was surveyed at EF0. Eventually, that same storm, and from what I understand of the debris detector, the correlation coefficient drop, I believe it was continuous. This is from the National Weather Service. Of course, it's preliminary, so they may not have connected that yet. Um, but they haven't given all the details on that. But uh, I'll take you to the next one of Senatobia, Mississippi, which is highest end EF3 so far. Um, Senatobia was a bear of its own. Um, Unfortunately, it came out much later that the outdoor warning sirens did not go off for their tornado
Mm,
warning. And this is an unfortunate thing. Of course, this is why we urge people to have multiple ways to get warnings, and those outdoor warning sirens aren't intended to wake you up.
even
But
when
that
they're
is
working.
right. That's of course something that a lot of people will hear and then realize, okay, action needs to be taken. And so with those not going off, um, we don't know what the impact was, but it was a clear need to repair. as part of their recovery efforts, that is going to be top of mind for them. Um, so that's a one scary situation. Of course, this was also at night. The Bay Village to Lake City tornado, that was kind of our last storm that we had a good view of in the daytime. And this continued well past sunset, which is around 7:30 or so, I think. Um, then continuing down the list, Selmer, Tennessee. This was a storm we had confirmed for a while. And this was actually the storm that had our first tornado emergency issued of the evening. Excuse me, this was the second, because Lake City got a tornado emergency. Um, but the one that eventually went to Selmer, as it was coming out of Mississippi, um, and again, this is where these are preliminary results. I'm not certain if the Sladen Grand Junction tornado there, just below Selmer. Um, the thing is, we had multiple warnings over the
So
same areas.
right. So as a meteorologist, how do you handle that when you're trying to communicate to multiple communities at the same time?
So the thing that I've resorted to for tornado emergencies specifically is I just read exactly what the National Weather Service says. Um, of your life is in danger. This will wreck homes. Like I forget what their script is for
Right.
it, but
Something
they
like
have
that.
it in every emergency. Um, and it is very strong language. And I'm just like, I'm just going to exactly quote the National Weather Service because they say it best. And then just to push forward, like, your life is in danger. I know we're talking about, I frequently say, treat every tornado warning the same. You should not treat a tornado emergency the same because this is where we know this will kill someone. And we don't like using scary language, especially in the lead up to something. We say be prepared, not scared a lot.
Yeah.
But when we know it's heading to a town, we've got a 2 mile wide debris ball, and this is a violent tornado. You have to sort of change your mindset into, people's lives are now immediately at risk. And when we had that first tornado emergency come through Selmer or Grand Junction and eventually went through Selmer, another storm came right behind it, and another, and another. There were, I think, 4 storms that went over the same communities, possibly 5. Again, the count in my head was it was tough to keep count, but um, once we get to the second warning there that I sent you, James, um, some of these communities we were already hearing reports of damage in places like Grand Junction, in places like Selmer, and I've never heard a broadcast meteorologist giving this kind of messaging, but I basically said, if you just had a tornado warning, this is a new one.
Right.
Don't think that it was accidentally reissued. Don't hit the snooze button on it. This is a new tornado that could do exactly what just happened 20 minutes ago.
I can remember a couple years ago at the day job at WCNC, our app automatically sends alerts, but then we'll send news alerts ourselves on top of that. And
Mhm,
to your point, kid, I remember even here in the Carolinas, somewhere in the foothills, I was like, yet another or
mhm,
like a second tornado warning. Like, this is not like if you went to your safe place and you came back out, you need to return.
mhm. I said exactly that. And I realized people might not have a safe place because you
Hmm.
think EF3, EF4 damage, you're removing exterior walls, you're removing roofs. So
Right.
where we tell everyone to go, interior closet, those are now exterior walls. And I had that realization on air, and I basically said, neighbors, if you have a neighbor who just got hit, go find your neighbors and invite them to your shelter.
Hmm.
Um, and that, to me, it was sort of an out of body experience. Hearing myself say something like that, you just got hit by a tornado, another might be coming. The second and third ones, it looked like they, at least by the vortex signature, they skirted around Selmer. Um, but Selmer is a place where we've sent several reporters already. And I mean, some of those pictures there, I mean, clear EF3 damage, like the National Weather Service found, but it's just you keep going back to the lives impacted and
Yeah.
everyone uh who did survive. Like there were some folks who were in a proper storm shelter, concrete bunker, and I saw a picture of a car just right on top of
Yeah.
that concrete bunker, and everyone survived.
I,
So
I saw pictures this week of like homes destroyed, and I'm sure you've seen them too, where all that was left was hopefully the safe place, the
mhm,
closet, the bathroom in the middle of the home, and just the power of these storms. And while the tornadoes get a lot of headlines, you guys also had widespread flooding. You were a
mhm.
part of the same storm system that people maybe have heard of from Ohio or Kentucky. Like, here's a look right now at the National Weather Service office in Paducah, Kentucky. And for our audio listeners, this is days after the event, and they've still got all those orange or the green flood warnings up. You guys had flood emergencies for Memphis too, on top of the
Mhm.
tornadoes.
Yeah, so, Thursday was our only dry day, if I remember correct. It might have been Friday. Um, uh, yeah, I think it was
Your
Friday.
confusion is half of the explanation. Actually, it's like point in case.
Yeah. Um, so we had the first wave Wednesday, I believe a second wave Thursday. Friday was our calm day where everything sort of dried out. And then Saturday we had another day. So there's the storm prediction center, high risk, and there's the weather prediction center, high risk. That's a 4 out of 4 scale for flash flooding.
Hmm.
And we had, I believe, for the event, there were 4 days in a row of high risks, but the second or third day was back into Arkansas, so it was less for us. But we had already had over 6 inches, I think over 8 inches of rain, maybe up to 8 inches of rain, just from the first 2 days. We dried out the third day, and then the fourth day, every stream was already filled to the brim. And so immediately we started getting widespread flash flooding. I actually have that stat, James,
Oh,
for
do
the
you?
4 day.
Okay.
Yeah, for the 4 day. um,
I had put in our DM any way to know the total multi-day rain total.
yeah, so we had, of course, the heaviest rainfall from it came on that final day, and
When you're really just thinking
I
enough
find
is enough.
right. And
Yeah.
everyone's already seen like a few flash flood warnings. Once we got that flash flood emergency, it was like we had to sort of uh, reframe the emergency um, language that we had been telling folks from the past couple of days of this is where we don't want to hide. We hide from the wind, we run from the
Yes.
surge, is what we say for hurricanes.
So
And I
this is like,
started using that analogy for the flash flooding.
and I was going to say, Frank, am I crazy? But everything Kit has said in the last 2-3 minutes is giving me like Helene level flashbacks. Frank is muted. He's pulled what we call a Scotty, but I think he said absolutely.
Scotty. Pull the
Yeah.
Scotty. Yeah, it does remind me a lot of Helene and having and the coverage I heard during that
Mhm.
reminds me of severe weather situations in like central Oklahoma,
Mhm.
where
Yeah.
you get hit one time after another, and you also have flooding and tornadoes, and it's like, okay, what's your plan B for when your primary shelter is flooded?
Yeah. I
Mhm.
need these people to flee the water, and
Mhm.
I need these people to shelter in place from the wind.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. All right. Here's Kit's rainfall totals. That's a lot of rain, Kit.
Yeah, so over a foot of rain in 3 days. Remember, because the third day was technically no rain at all. So day one, day two, and day four, we got over a foot of rainfall, which is, I think, 2 or 2.5 times the amount of normal rain we get in the month of April.
Yeah.
So all of that in 4 or 5 days. There were many streets that were underpasses that were flooded. There's still communities that now the rivers have risen and flooded. I think up in Obion County and Dyer County, Tennessee, which is the northwest corner, the Obion River is flooding downtown Dyersburg now. Earl,
As the water's
Arkansas
flowing.
is also, yeah, I think the St. Francis River, I think. Don't quote me on that. But Earl, Arkansas was also seeing its main highway covered in water. And so they don't really have an in or out into Earl.
Yeah, this
Um,
really, I mean, these numbers do very much make me flash back to 6 months ago with Helene and prolonged coverage and the predecessor rain event, and then all of that water trying to flow downstream. The
mhm,
other thing that I think our audience will be familiar with, because Frank, I think it was just last week we were talking about it, and Kit mentioned it here. So, Kit, I guess maybe you've noticed it too. The SPC, the Storm Prediction Center from NOAA, they are on their A game this year with 5, 6, 7 day outlooks.
Hmm. I think that they've probably been pushing that later part of the forecast in like sort of the behind the scenes, the research side. They've probably been working a lot on the back end of things. I know the Hurricane Center has also been working on the back end to try to push it out to 7 days for their cone. A couple years ago, where I previously worked, we had Ken Graham, the former National Weather Service or National Hurricane Center director, now the director of NWS. Um, he said that one of the things he tried to push out from the Hurricane Center was a 7 day cone, and they just couldn't quite get it. Wasn't quite there yet. Um, but these long range outlooks, it takes development of the forecast, research to prove that it is scientifically significant to say that we can forecast accurately that far out. Um, and I think that this may be a sign that the forecast, even though they've had that 8 day outlook for several years now, I can't remember when they rolled it out, but clearly the forecasting
I've
skill
never
has
seen it
increased.
populated 3 or 4 times this early in spring.
Right.
Like, wow.
Right.
And
Well,
I think it's
I think
go ahead,
part of
Frank.
it is that their confidence level is just higher than it used to be, and maybe they're just realizing that the models have gotten pretty good, and when they're in agreement, like they have
Mhm.
been a lot with some of these severe weather situations, that you just have a lot more confidence that you can put that slight risk. 10, what is it, 15%, 30%? I can't remember what it is,
Mhm.
but what they
Right.
use for day 4 and out. But um, that they can do that, but and be more accurate with it on day 6 and 7 than like 10 years ago, or 15, I guess, when they started
Yeah.
doing these
Mhm.
long range outlooks.
I've been using the Colorado State machine learning tool they have.
Hmm.
That
Mm-hmm.
sort of the Weather Service has their own version of this machine learning sort of whatever AI black box forecasting that they get down to, like they can populate a whole array of cities with the probability. Um, so of course, like you said, Frank, there's the 15%, 30%, moderates 45, I think high is 60%. Um, but they can populate down to the probability to the city. And they've got that in AWIPS, but the Colorado State machine learning program has that as well as just a single map. You can't really interact with it. But I was looking at that several days out, and it also honed right in on the Mid South for the highest risk of significant severe here across the Mid South. And that was several days out. So clearly, some of the advancements we have with AI coming into the forecast
Right.
process is having some influence on our forecast accuracy, which is encouraging to see, so long as AI doesn't take my job.
That's coming. I think it's coming. Hopefully,
Well,
hopefully not soon, but I think it's coming. I think
You'll
it'll
get
be
these
happening
charming
in
good looks
radio
from
very
AI.
soon.
I mean, this is true. This is very true. I think it's also probably worth noting broadcast, public sector, private sector, there's fewer people working than there were even just weeks ago. And we're going to talk later on in the show about some new things we've learned about National Weather Service cuts and things. My point is only to, again, just appreciate National Weather Service, broadcast meteorologists, people working endless hours here for this life-saving information. And
Mhm.
you know, unfortunately, in these events, we time and time again do see the loss of life. And sometimes I try to pause and remind myself maybe how much worse it would be if we didn't have what systems we had in place. And then, of course, in hindsight, you go, how do we improve it better for the next time? But a lot of people working a lot of Long Island's hours, yourself included, Kit, as we are just barely into April.
Mhm. And we were on air for 14 hours day one. Our morning meteorologist, now our chief, newly promoted, um, bless him, he was up for 28 hours, at work for 27 of them. He
We
came
will.
in the morning of Wednesday, did not go home like he was supposed to, uh, and started with the live coverage right with me. At 11 o'clock, I said, Trevor, we still have another few hours. The watch, I think, was until 2. And I was like, Trevor, let me take this solo for the rest. He's like, no, I'm not going to leave you with it. And of course, that's when Selmer happened right after then. And we had, 4 or 5 tornado warned storms crossing through the same communities over and over and over. So I'm glad that he volunteered to stay up 24 hours. But uh, that was jarring, and that was it was tough because we're a 2-person team and we had to come back in the next day and do it, and then do it the next 2 days after that. So something you're talking about, just sort of mental health on things. On Sunday, I woke up twice, heart racing, in a panic, fumbling for my phone, thinking I just missed a tornado watch, in sort of the post event, like go, go, go
Yeah.
mentality. I didn't realize it's Sunday, it's over.
Yeah, because you're still racing.
Mm-hmm.
Well, we've had James Spann on the show, and he talks about the 2011 outbreak and all that it's a decade or more later sticks with him. And it's incredible to think about, and it's probably often forgotten about. But I'll give my hats off to you and to Trevor. It's probably, and I can't speak for your news management, just generically, a stubborn meteorologist probably drives news management insane, but a stubborn meteorologist is a good meteorologist. So 28 straight hours, that's a really long shift.
Yeah. And mentioning James Spann, this 2011 super outbreak, we mentioned that at one point in our stream of we were talking about, like, we were sort of in a lull, and we were talking about what is an outbreak, and then, well, what is a super outbreak? This, of course, I don't get to make the judgment on whether or not it was a super outbreak. Of course, I've seen already that there were 14 states with tornadoes, so that's got the breadth of that. But I was referring back to the super outbreak, and I remembered, I think either from something James Spann had said in his coverage, or in the conversation we had had with him here on Carolina Weather Group, from back when I was in college. But I remember him saying at one point, we are treating every storm as on the ground. And I took that wisdom from him from years ago as my attitude for that event on that Wednesday.
Yeah, absolutely. And you just reminded me, we can show people the Storm Prediction Center reports. For our audio listeners, we'll try to paint a picture, but for those of you watching on the screen here, here's April 2nd, lots of dots across the region. And now here comes April 3rd. We've got more dots. These dots represent tornado reports, wind reports, hail reports.
And pausing on that one there.
Okay, yeah, pausing on the 3rd.
You can see how it's all in a line. Rather, the second was pretty broad across the Midwest, Mid-South. This one is line. And that's because the cold front that brought day 1 stalled as a stationary boundary for day 2, day 3, and day 4.
And just kept hitting you guys over and over and over again. Yep. Because here,
technically, day 1 was April 1st across the Central Plains, and it progressed and then stalled.
I started with the ones that had some dots in your neck of the woods. Again, more here on the 4th, the 5th, the 6th. It's finally out of Memphis, but it's still impacting Eastern Tennessee, Georgia, and Alabama. And then Carolina is on the 7th, which we will talk about. So I just wanted to show people kind of that visualization over and over and over again.
Yeah.
So
I've never felt such a sense of this is never going to end. But it was.
But it did. It did end.
It did. But there was one point that I was kind of laughing on air, and I felt kind of guilty because I didn't want, and I apologized. I said, it's the absurdity of this, because that was, I think, our 3rd or 4th tornado warning for the same communities. It was, I was feeling empathetically for the people who were being impacted, but I was also dog tired. Yeah. And I was like, when will this end? And I was like, I am fascinated by weather, but I'm getting so fed up at this point that I don't want it wasn't I don't want to do this anymore. It was something just a tick below that.
It was like a level of ridiculousness had set in.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I know you've got a newscast to do here in a couple minutes, Kit. So the producer and me is going to wrap you. For anybody who has missed you here in the Carolina Weather Group, we know you went to school here in the Carolinas and you're doing big, great things now. Where can they watch you on the aforementioned live stream?
So ABC 24 is my station here in Memphis. I'm Kit Thomas WX on most social platforms. You can download our app, ABC 24 app, on your Google Play and App Store. Of course, we also have started making the switch to digital. So on Fire Stick, Roku, and Apple TV, we have the ABC 24 Plus app on that as well.
I know my techno training was going to kick in and promote it with you. Well, thank you for all you did. Thank you for taking time to come back and talk with us here. Please come back again.
I could talk another 14 hours on this.
Well, you certainly could, except for it would be a really interesting newscast when they joined you in progress.
Yeah. Thank you so much for having me, James.
All right. Thanks, Kit. Talk to you again soon. Frank, what a crazy couple of days there. You know, again, multiple states: Ohio, Kentucky, Indiana, Arkansas, Mississippi, Iowa. Did I say Tennessee already? I must have. My camera's zooming out to show all of my fingers counting. Thank you, AI-powered camera. I'm holding a positive altitude. Yeah.
My screen share, by the way, is the April 2011.
Yeah, let me pop that back up.
So
just to
for,
show people
for comparison to
what
what has been called a super outbreak. Okay, this is the 23rd when things started, with only 13 tornado reports and 171 total. But there's the 24th and the 25th. That's when things really started to get going. The 26th, the 27th. That was the big day.
That's New York.
292 tornado reports.
Yeah.
I'm not necessarily that many confirmed tornadoes. There certainly were potentially dozens from the same tornado, but and then there's a 28th, a few more along the East Coast. That's the end of it.
So if anybody hasn't already seen one of our most popular episodes, and we've just been blessed to talk to him time and time again, is with James Spann from Birmingham, Alabama, who talks at length about the outbreak here in 2011 that Frank is showing. But, you know, Frank, the classic kind of progression here, and we kind of had this same thing happen in the Carolinas with this storm this week. Once it finally got to us, once it had unstalled itself, I don't think that's the correct phrase, but that's what I'm gonna go with. It did bring storms to us here in the Carolinas on Monday, and I know one of those storms we covered as a live stream here in the Carolina Weather Group, because the National Weather Service in Morehead City had issued a destructive severe thunderstorm warning for portions of Greenville, North Carolina, in eastern North Carolina. And we promised that we would circle back to it here on our weekly show and kind of give you more analysis. But these are the warnings and the storm reports from this past Monday. Again, this is kind of the tail end of that system that Kit was just telling us about, brought them days and days and days of severe weather. Well, once it finally got here, we did get verified wind damage reports at least 64 miles an hour. We did get hail up here in Greenville, North Carolina at 1.75 inches. That is enough for a considerable tag. It's probably not something too widely known. It's still relatively new, but severe thunderstorm warnings can come in 3 tiers. The base warning at 60 miles an hour is what you get a dozen times in the summer. But, you know, kind of to Kit's point, Frank, the Weather Service has these exclamation points they can put on things to go, no, really, we mean it. And they can do that with these considerable and destructive tags. And I know when I looked at the radar on Monday and I saw the warning over Greenville pulsating as it does on the app to be like, this one's really bad. It made me do a double take.
Right. And that destructive tag, that triggers your cell phone warnings.
Yes. Now. It sure does.
That is the highest level severe thunderstorm warning. So you'll get a beep on your phone if the Weather Service decides they have to put one of those out. Those are pretty rare.
They are very rare.
Part of the country.
Yeah, well, they want you to treat it like a tornado warning. They want you to seek shelter. And we actually have video of that thunderstorm moving over Greenville. You can see the shelf cloud here.
Nice shelf cloud, yeah.
From the East Carolina University WeatherStem camera, thanks to our friends at WeatherStem. And we'll loop this again, and you can see the storm moving over the campus. And this was, again, after it had already done miles and miles worth of damage, because by the time it got to East Carolina University, that's up by the 1.75, and it's moving along a line that had already caused damage all the way back to the I-95 corridor. Matter of fact, the WeatherStem folks not only have this system here at the university in Greenville, but they also have a weather station that is over in Clinton at the Smithfield facility. And so, Frank, I wanted to show this, and maybe you can help me do some live time analysis here. But you can see, as we look at, this is the time lapse from Clinton as that same line of storms moves through. You can kind of see here just in a moment, the skies get dark. It's moving away from us, so you don't necessarily see the shelf cloud at this vantage point the same way. But look at the temperature drop right here at 3 o'clock in the afternoon. We went from 84 degrees all the way down to 67 degrees as that storm came on through. 50 mile per hour, 10-minute wind gust was recorded. I don't even know if that's the highest. That is just what I've sampled here as that storm system came on through. And then we can also look at the data from, and you can see again, here's that shelf cloud that came on through. We dropped from 85 degrees after peaking at almost 88 down to 68.8 degrees and at least 25 mile per hour winds. I wouldn't be surprised if that was higher, but I mean, these are powerful storms, Frank.
Yeah, well, that's because it was essentially summertime out ahead of it.
Yeah.
We were having June-like warmth with temperatures up in the 80s. It was humid too, so there was ample thunderstorm fuel available for these storms to go really bonkers there in eastern North Carolina.
I think the way you phrase that is so spot on. We went from summertime back to winter.
Pretty much
with this transition, because we've
had
freeze
from
warnings.
June to late February's. Yeah,
we went from destructive severe thunderstorm warnings to freeze warnings in some of these same places. And you've maybe have seen it if you've started a garden, if you're a farmer. Maybe you've taken action over the last 24 hours to protect your plants. I know we got down to like 37 or something here in Charlotte. If you're a golf fan, I think the Masters is having one of its coldest Masters mornings in Augusta there, because we got this cold snap. Maybe the last cold snap of the season as parts of the Carolina have started their growing season.
Yeah, we'll talk about that in a minute, whether this will be the last word or not. For most of the Carolinas, looks like it will be. But this morning, a lot of places were at or below 32 across the foothills in North Carolina, and definitely in the mountains. Some spots are in the 20s, and I think Greensboro was down to 32. I don't think any place that in South Carolina got down to 32. It was like 39 at GSP this morning. That was the coldest I remember seeing, but I didn't look at every spot there was to look at. The usual cold spots like Mount Sassafras and the higher spots, they might have got down to 32, but I don't think very many places did. But there probably was some patchy frost here and there in some wind sheltered areas in South Carolina. But will it be our last cold snap of the year? First, we got to talk about what's coming our way in the short term, which let's look at the satellite picture first.
Oh, our new Goes East satellite pictures?
That's what I was about to say. Our new
I'm so sorry.
East satellite.
I spoiled it.
That's right. You spoiler you. Anyway, yes, this is actually a new weather satellite. It was just launched last year. The original one that was launched in 2016, which was named GOES 16 and became the official GOES East satellite. That one has been replaced by a fresh new satellite, and I think the image quality is a little bit better from this one than from the old one, probably because it's a brand spanking new satellite. But anyway, that's what we're looking at here, a current infrared satellite view of the United States from our new GOES East satellite. And keep in mind, this is an infrared satellite picture. It senses temperatures rather than things you could see. But the colder things that are your brighter colors, those are your higher cloud tops. So that tells you where like storms are and showers and cirrus clouds and things like that. And warm things like land out in Arizona where there isn't any clouds. that shows up as like dark gray. So that's warm stuff. So you can see we have a bunch of these brighter colors in patches there over the Midwest and up into the Plain States, and a little swirling mass up there from a storm that's centered near Fargo, North Dakota now. Well, that storm's going to be dropping southeastward and pulling a cold front into the Carolinas. Now we'll jump ahead to some computer models. And as you can see, this is tomorrow evening, 8 p.m. On the GFS model. And by this point, that storm is over the Tennessee Valley and back into the Ohio Valley. And we have a trailing cold front back into Texas here, and that is generating precipitation, in this case, some shower and thunderstorm activity. Now, there's going to be some risk for severe weather with this, but mostly to our west. Here's what the severe weather outlook looks like. Let me make that smaller so it doesn't, so it actually fits into the screen. Slight risk area back in Kitts area, back in Memphis, over to Huntsville and Atlanta, surrounded by a marginal level 1 of 5 risk area that does clip the Western Carolinas. And we do expect to see some showers and thunderstorms pushing in late in the day tomorrow into tomorrow evening. And some of those can be severe. Locally damaging wind is the primary concern. I don't think the tornado risk is exactly 0, but it is pretty low and kind of minimal. So that's for Thursday. And as these storms push farther east into the Carolinas, they weaken. The good news is from this is that we do have some more needed rain on the way. At least spotty rains from this. It won't be as good as what we had with the last storm system, where most of the Carolinas got a good soaking. It was like an inch and 2/3 here in Columbia, for example. So we got some good rain, some needed rain over most of the Carolinas. A little bit more on the way with this next storm system. Now, this is your Thursday. Now, jumping ahead through Thursday night, Friday morning, that low's over roughly Mount Sassafras in South Carolina, and then it tracks toward Greensboro during the day and eventually to Norfolk if the GFS is right by the end of the day. And the trailing cold front pushes through the Carolinas. We run the risk of seeing some more thunderstorm activity out ahead of that cold front and storm system. And here is the severe weather outlook for Friday. This is the day 3 outlook. And again, right now they have some level 1 of 5 covering eastern South Carolina and roughly I-95 in east and North Carolina, though it is a little further west than I-95 there. It goes all the way up to Durham there. For example, so it does go a little further west than I-95, but roughly the I-95 corridor in east. And there's a risk for some more locally damaging wind, maybe an isolated tornado or two. The SPC did mention in their outlook that if there's enough sunshine on Friday, that's going to be the question. If it ends up being a sunnier day than expected, then this risk level might have to be bumped up to level 2 instead of level 1. So we'll keep an eye on that. But for now, it looks like some isolated, severe, locally damaging wind. And perhaps an isolated tornado is going to be a concern for Friday as well. And also, because of this storm system pushing in, it's going to get pretty cool aloft. The freeze levels are going to be lower than usual. So there's going to be a greater potential for some hail. It may not be severe hail. It may end up being just a lot of people seeing small hail, but the potential is going to be there for some hail in addition to the damaging wind and isolated tornado risk there on Friday.
Well, you mentioned bumping this marginal up to a slight with a chance of hail. That sounds like Monday all over again. And we saw how that overperformed. And I guess I can't guarantee it's going to overperform again, but drawing an analog of it can happen. We've seen it this week.
Well, and this is prime time for severe weather. April and May tend to be the busiest severe weather months. So don't be surprised to see severe weather this time of year and have to make ready for it.
Yeah. We will have our Carolina Weather Net streaming for you on our YouTube channel with free streaming, severe weather warnings, radar, and sky cams. You can watch it any place you watch YouTube, from your smartphone to your smart TV. It can be one of the several ways that you get severe weather warnings. But just like Frank said, and we talked earlier with Kit, it's always good to have more than one way to get severe weather warnings.
Exactly. 2 it should be your minimum. By the way, behind the severe weather, another chilly shot comes in. Again, it doesn't look like it's going to be as cold as the one we just saw that brought us the frost last night and this morning and freezing temperatures in some areas. But there's your lows for Saturday morning, some 30s in the mountains, mostly 40s elsewhere in the Carolinas. Sunday morning, potentially down to freezing in the colder spots of the mountains, maybe high up, even a little colder than that. Could get cold enough for some frost and outside of those colder spots in the mountains, and then maybe even into the foothills. Probably not cold enough for frost anywhere in South Carolina or farther east in North Carolina. But again, something to keep an eye on is that some of you may be protecting some tender plants again over the weekend.
But cold enough for the fireplace.
Cold enough for the fireplace, yes. Or the fireplace outdoors, if that's your thing.
Well, speaking of it, may I use that as a transition? I don't want to cut off your forecast.
I'm done.
You're okay. I've done it before, and I didn't want to do it again on you. I wanted to talk about the fire weather, which we've had a lot of in the past few weeks, and you can do those outdoor fire pits because we have finally gotten the fire weather threat down to a good threshold, and wanted to update everybody on our two big fires. First and foremost, in upstate South Carolina, the Table Rock Complex, Table Rock and the Persimmons fire, 100% contained. That does not necessarily mean that the fire is out. It just means it is not spreading, and firefighters feel like they have it contained. So you can see here on your screen, if you're watching with us on YouTube and on Facebook, you can see the red outlines of where that fire line is, and they have that 100% contained, thanks in part to the return of humidity and the return of rain, and not those really dry, windy conditions we had for several weeks on edge there. In western North Carolina, the Black Cove fire is nearing 100% containment, 98% containment here on this Wednesday night for the Black Cove fire, the Deep Woods fire at 86%. So, Frank, it feels like we've been dealing with these fires for a month now, and I think we maybe have been discovered on 3/19, so almost, but they are nearing 100% containment. This is close, as you shared, to your folks there in Western North Carolina, so I'm sure they're also ready for this to be done.
Yes, and they're happy to be able to breathe a little better now that there's not smoke in the air all the time. It certainly was not fun when those fires were going. I spent a couple of nights with my parents, thanks to the being in Asheville for that conference that I met Evan at there. But yeah, the air was quite smoky, and even indoors, there was a smoky smell, thanks to just the high concentration of smoke in the area. From there were 3 fires going on at the time. I think 2 of them emerged, and one of them might well be just plain out. The one that's on the north end of Lake Adger.
Yes, they got that one relatively. That stayed on some private lands. I think it did not have any evacuations, and that was one of the first ones to. I think
it did have a few evacuations on the north side
of
Lake Adger there, but it was not a large number of people. I think they're back home now.
Maybe that was my recollection, that they were allowed to return first. It certainly got to the point where it was like, who's on first with all of these fires that were breaking out? Because we also know there were more than just these. We've just shown the big ones.
There were dozens of smaller fires. I mean, there was one on right along 26 there in Spartanburg County, heading up into the mountains, that they managed to get that one put out quickly.
Wildfires. Now,
thank goodness, because it would have not been good if they had to shut down 26 for that fire, for example.
Yeah, here's some video and photos that were shared out over the course of the last few weeks. And we know this took firefighters from across the region, even from areas where the fires weren't burning, from Charlotte, from Greensboro. They went over there to help on out to combat some of these fires. And I think in some of these imagery, we can even see the Helene scars. As we're looking here, I think at Table Rock, you can see the downed trees from Helene, which was causing all that, in part, excess fuel with the debris there laying on its side on the ground.
Right. And seasoned wood, it had been down for 6 months when the fire broke out. So
very dry. Very dry. Speaking of Helene, as we've been telling you here on the Carolina Weather Group, we want to keep our finger on the pulse of the recovery effort as we continue now, more than 6 months after the storm. Frank and Evan meeting in Asheville at a conference to mark the 6-month anniversary and going through over some scientific data. Well, another milestone as part of the recovery here, Norfolk Southern sharing that just this week they marked a milestone with a train passing in through Asheville's River Arts District for the first time since the storm. This was all underwater. They've been able to get not only their infrastructure back in, but this is a lifeline for rebuilding efforts to be able to move commerce. So the line between Asheville and Newport was amongst the hardest hit. Remote terrain, heavy flooding, and mountainous conditions wiped out entire stretches of tracks, the railroad said. And they, along with other railroads like CSX, have been working to rebuild their line. So, we talk a lot about trains on the show quite a bit, but I think this really is this is a commerce win for everybody to get this back up and running, Frank.
Yeah, it is. And I guess I'll have to ask my son about that. I don't know if I've mentioned on Carolina Weather Group or not that my son is a conductor for Norfolk Southern. That conductor is the number 2 guy of 2 on trains these days, with the engineer being the lead guy. So that's what my son does for a living. He drives trains for Norfolk Southern. So I'll have to ask him about that. I don't think that is in his area. He tends to work more in Charlotte and Greenville and Spartanburg rather than Asheville. But it'd be interesting to hear his perspective on that.
If I'm not mistaken, this archival video we're looking at from September, this is some of those same hard-hit areas where you can actually see the Norfolk Southern rail yard underwater from the flooding of the Swananoa River in the Asheville Arts District here. So kind of just to draw that comparison, this was the before, as certainly a lot of us have seen that imagery, but specifically here with the railroad in particular, you can see, their equipment, the tracks completely underwater, and then fast forward to this week, you can see they've got a service running again. I wasn't trying to say flash forward, but flash flooding was on my mind.
Right.
Here we are. Couple other things before we go this week. Another follow-up. This was something we had brought you, I think it was at the tail end of 2023 now, how time flies. But the National Weather Service in Columbia was one of a small handful of National Weather Service offices that were testing the use of artificial intelligence to auto-translate severe weather bulletins. The National Hurricane Center was using it for forecasting. We're not just talking Spanish, we're talking Chinese, we're talking multiple languages. We have a whole episode on this back in our Carolina Weather Group archive. The website and the like were actually being developed in Columbia, and Columbia was testing it for some of their localized severe weather alerts. Well, we have now learned through a variety of reporting and confirmation from the National Weather Service that as part of ongoing budget cuts at NOAA, this project is no more. It has been paused. The artificial intelligence translation program that we have been following for a little while here has been paused as part of that cost-cutting operation by the federal government. So weather.gov/translate. Matter of fact, Frank, I haven't actually even tried to go to it. I don't know what happens if I try to pull it up.
That's a good question. I haven't tried either.
The translated text product functionality,
anyway.
may be interrupted after 3/31. Further details will be provided when available. I don't know that we'll really ever. But I can't click on them. I was gonna click on it to show you how. Oh no, there we go. So wow, actually, I gotta say, it had been a minute since I come back to this site, and you can see how many other offices besides Columbia had joined the testing. Greenville, Spartanburg, among them was one of them. Again, National Hurricane Center. It's an unfortunate loss of a potentially life-saving product using technology to reach our entire population. So maybe it's something that can come back in some form or fashion, but certainly if that was something that you or someone was relying on, it is currently not available.
Yeah, and I can tell you that I can't speak so much about the other offices, but I can tell you that Columbia, they don't have time for testing anything right now. They're down like 7 bodies right now.
Wow.
I think it's
7.
We know. So
wow.
They are very shorthanded right now.
Yeah.
They can barely keep the lights on.
And the severe weather is not slowing down. So I don't know. I was thinking about this. I can only hope that with the accessibility of AI, like on our phones now, that if this was a service that people relied on, they might be able to come up with a workflow that works for them. But that is workflows, those one-off workflows like that are never as comprehensive, as well tested as an actual program. Because I remember when we talked to the National Weather Service in Columbia for our interview, and I'll have to go dig up the archival episode there somewhere again in 2023. They weren't just testing to see like how fast it could be done, but they were looking at specific dialects to make sure that the words translated, because they knew that this was only going to be an effective program if it was in fact something that people who natively spoke that language understood. Because we've probably all used Google Translate at some point or another, and it,
Right.
it gets you there, but there could be some very specific differences in meanings of those words that could change how you interpret them.
Exactly. Like people up north might say garden hose, and down here a lot of people say hose pipe, and half the rest of the country would have no clue what you're talking about if you said hose pipe.
I don't
And the
know
same
what you're
thing
talking.
happens in other same thing happens in other languages. In Spain, they speak a different flavor of Spanish than they do in Mexico or Guatemala.
Certainly.
So they have to hone in on that, because we don't have a lot of people immigrating from Spain, but we do have a lot coming from Central America. So
yeah, Spanish in Central America
important.
versus Spain is different.
Right.
And I liked your English comparison as well too, between the North and the South, and you could use certainly other regions there too. Checking my list, Frank. I think that's my list for this week. It looks like it is.
I can't think of anything else. I got to talk about what actual weather is going to happen for a while. That's why I'm happy.
Yes. Where's Stormy? We haven't seen Stormy.
She's actually been around. That's one thing. Another thing you don't see behind the scenes at Carolina Weather Group. But I have a new workstation, a new desk, and she's been here. She's been trying to be on my lap, but it's not a particularly good spot for her now. And
I could pop it up. Do you want me to put the picture on?
Oh yeah, go ahead.
All right, I'm like looking at it. Like, let's see. Is there anything?
I don't think I have too many intimate personal items in that picture.
I think so.
Yeah, there we go.
No, there you go.
It wasn't 100%. Obviously, the next investment is a new chair.
I thought maybe it just had a really good backstory.
It does. That it's about 15 years old, and I've worn all the fake leather away.
My keyboard at work is so rubbed off you can't even see the letters. And more than once they're like, "Do you want us to get you a new keyboard?" I was like, "No, this is a battle-tested keyboard."
Right.
So I thought that was maybe like your chair. But
yep.
Thanks again to all of you who support the Carolina Weather Group on YouTube memberships and on Patreon. You can see them here once again. We got Frank some new lights. We got Frank a new green screen stand. So your support really does make a difference, and we very much appreciate all those names scrolling at the bottom of the screen. You can join Patreon or YouTube memberships for just $1, unlock extras, and help support the show and keep the lights on.
Mm-hmm.
So that does it. We're coming up on the 1 hour mark, Frank. So I think we might take next week off for spring break. Maybe we'll put a rerun on the feed. We'll certainly keep an eye on severe weather, and if we need to change our plans, we will.
We'll do what we have to do. And that would mean a remote broadcast for me, because I'll be in New Orleans for a hurricane conference next week.
Well, that sounds exciting. I like how Frank's spring break trip is another weather conference. Very on brand. I like it. So,
vacation. What's vacation?
What is this thing that you speak of? Thanks to our guest this week, Kit Thomas, former Carolina Weather Group panelist and broadcast meteorologist now at ABC 24 in Memphis. Thanks to my co-panelist, Frank Strait there in Columbia. I'm James Brierton in Charlotte. Have a safe spring break. We'll be streaming severe storm coverage on Thursday and Friday and anytime over on our YouTube channel. But until then, be well. We'll talk to you again real soon. Bye-bye.
Bye, y'all.